Welcome to With One Accord, the Houston Chamber Choir podcast. I'm Flynn, host of Behind the Music. Today's episode is made possible in part by the generous support of Silvercrest Asset Management Group, providing an unparalleled level of quality investment advice. This time, it's a great privilege to be able to talk to María Guinand, who is in Caracas, Venezuela. Maria, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I should say that you're here talking to me today on Behind the Music because you have conducted the Houston Chamber Choir on a couple of occasions, haven't you?
Yes, I have, and I am extremely proud of that group and of Bob Simpson's work. And I want to congratulate them also on their recent recognitions and awards. I think it's a wonderful ensemble. It's a very professional, but musically beautifully formed and with a lot of enthusiasm. So thank you. I'm very happy to be conducting this group again.
You first conducted the Chamber Choir, I think, in February of 2014. It was a program that featured music of the Americas. I want to start by asking you, do you see, or what are your impressions of the differences between conducting ensembles in your native Venezuela and conducting ensembles elsewhere? Are there differences in the way that ensembles are created, how they react, how they perform?
Oh, yes. I think, first of all, we have to think of the type of an ensemble. Mm-hmm. You know, if we are talking about university ensembles or colleges or high schools or children or professionals, they differ from each other. Mm-hmm. But also they differ from the USA type of ensembles and the ensembles in Venezuela, because we are different cultures.
Right.
I mean, you come from a culture that is more Central Europeanly minded. Mm-hmm. Chorally speaking, your examples, let's say your major landmarks are the English school of singing or German or Scandinavian.
Right.
And we are Latins, so we speak Spanish, and our models of singing are more the Italian school of sacred music, Gregorian chant, but also opera. Also the Spanish school, and to a certain point, the French school. So I would say that there is a major difference in starting on the repertoire we sing,
right,
on the repertoire we choose, on the way we decide what to sing. But when we come to the formation of the choirs, it has to be also with the culture. I find that in the universities, for instance, now we created in the early 80s the first universities departments of music in Venezuela. They didn't exist before. Music was only taught in the music conservatories. So singers that were singing in choirs and were good singers, they would sing in the music conservatories, but they were not going to university. So most of the university choirs were formed by non-musicians, by good amateurs. Mm-hmm. So choirs were not auditioned, for instance.
Right.
But I conducted the university choir of the Simón Bolívar University, a scientific technological university, for more than 35 years. And people were there, they were so bright, so intelligent, and they learned so fast. And they learned it's not that they learn by rote. They couldn't really read music well, but they develop an ability to learn with the score, the sort of reading the score very fast, and they will learn by heart everything. So it was beautifully to perform with them because it was very flexible and you could change and enthusiastic. So in that respect, I think that in the United States, the fact that you have a more solid school of musical language and solfege and ear training and all that makes the reading of music sort of obligatory part in the choral life. And then you tend to do more repertoire in a whole year, but perhaps learn by heart less.
Right.
So I think there is a balance, in this, and then perhaps you devote, you try to make from the rehearsal, the most you can, but sometimes I feel that I would like to have a little bit more of rehearsal just to finish polishing everything. So, of course, here I work with my own choirs. So I am the one who sets the pace. When I am in the States, I am an invited, I am a guest. So I'm giving. But usually when I am in the States, no matter if it's a children's choir, junior high choir, honor choir, college, university, or professional choir, I have always had beautifully prepared groups before I come. So hardly ever I talk from scratch a repertoire in the States. So that's a great advantage. I am a privileged invited guest when I go there.
How did you come to music? Were you born into a musical family?
I can say yes. My mother's family were really very musical. My great grandfather was Manuel Guadalajara, this man.
Oh, really?
He wrote valses. He was that is his picture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was from Spanish origin. He was a flutist who lived in Caracas in the late 19th century, and he was very highly regarded as a musician, performer, and composer. And his wife, Mercedes Garcia, was a very good pianist. And in that time, it was not common that a woman would be so active professionally as a pianist. But he died when she was young and she was a widow, and she had to raise her children by playing the piano. So my grandmother was raised as a pianist also by her mother, and my mother also studied piano. So I had the opportunity, and all my siblings, somehow we studied an instrument, and we were given the opportunity to go to the music school. Out of all of them, I am the one who stayed in music professionally.
You went to do your undergraduate degree in music at the University of Bristol in Great Britain. What was that like for you to go all that way to a different culture? It must have been quite shocking at first, was it?
It was my choice, I have to say. In that time in Venezuela, there were not musical studies at the university. We had music only at the conservatories, and my father wanted me to go to university. So I started searching as we could search at that time. And I wonder, how did we do that? Because I had to get, how did we get the information? My God, you had to go to the embassies to find addresses and write a letter and put a stamp, send a letter. please send me the syllabus, send me so you had to start your process, 1 year and a half in advance in always to, but mail was working in Venezuela. Mail, email works, but normal mail, post doesn't work today. That is we have forgotten what that was. It's
Yes.
incredible, but it's like that.
I know what you mean.
So I did my research and I got accepted in Bristol University, and I was very excited to get there. It was not easy, or the audition process I had to do from Venezuela. And when I got there, I had a live audition talk with my professor, and he was very British. My English was not very fluent because I had studied English in Venezuela. I had never lived outside of my country in an English-speaking place. And I have to confess that at the beginning, I could not understand at all what he was talking about.
In that sort of situation, it's amazing how quickly you can learn, though, isn't it?
Yes. He started asking me questions about history of music. And of course, I could grasp the name or the topic, but, well, I don't think that interview went very well. And then he sat me at the piano and he said, okay, could you, he was asking me to sight read figured bass, vocal scores, orchestral scores. I have never done that in my life. I studied piano and I could play the piano. I mean, I had a lot of repertoire. I could sight read at the piano, but sight read a score, this was not a practice I had. So I think I failed that interview. So he sent me, it was, I think it was late July, something like that. He sent me home, and home already in England. And he said, okay, I trust you can do well, but you have to study 5 hours of score reading every day. And this is why I wear glasses.
Wore the eyes out.
Yeah, and you have to listen to the BBC radio so that you understand our British accent. So I did that because I was decided to live in England and to do my studies there. And the first day I arrived in my class, it was very tutorial class because we were only 10 students in my group, and the whole department were only 40 students. It was really very tutorial, and we had, I think, about 15 tutors. So we had many individual classes. And I remember that we were sitting in the common room drinking some tea, and I was trying to understand the British jokes. That was very hard. And I was asked by somebody, how do you feel here? Do you feel, and I say, well, I feel a little bit foreigner because I am the only non-English speaker here. And I say,
right.
And I think I said, I am the only foreigner here. And he looked at me and said, no, you are not. We have a Scottish and an Irish.
Yep. He must have been English.
Yes. So I was in a very English school.
Right.
But
yes.
I loved all my tutors. I didn't go back to Venezuela in those years. I communicated with my family through letters and phone calls from time to time. I was devoted to my studies, and then I came back to Venezuela 3 years later because my grant had finished. I was given many opportunities to work here as a very young musician with only a bachelor degree. And I said, I must stay here because it's so beautiful what I can create, but I need to study more. So I took a master's degree as an external student with Bristol for 4 more years. So I was in the summers, I will go there for 2.5 months to do my research, to study and all that. So in all, I was related like 7 years to England and Bristol. And it was the most rewarding, beautiful, and great experience in my life. I am so happy I chose England as my home base for my education.
Obviously, Britain has a very strong and very ancient choral tradition. But at what point did you begin to focus on choral music?
I had begun to focus on choral music even before going to England, because my first music teacher in life was Alberto Grau, my husband today.
Your husband.
And when I was 8 years old, he's 16 years older than me. When I was 8 years old and my mother was looking for a piano teacher for me, she was told that he was a young pianist, also a teacher, and he could do a good teacher for children. So he was my teacher, and he took me to the music school. But in the music school, he was conducting the choir, the children's choir, and then the youth choir. So I always was doing all my music subjects, like solfège, the history of music, harmony, counterpoint, piano, and always singing in the children's choir or in the youth choir. And when I was 17 years old, Alberto, he had already created the Schola Cantorum. I was not part of the Schola Cantorum because I was very young, but he created a class for choral conductors. That was the first attempt to do a class of choral conductors in Venezuela. He had been to an ACDA convention in the States, and he had been to a Europa Cantat festival, and he saw and he understood what was happening in other parts of the world, how to train conductors, and he was animated to do that. So we were a group of very young musicians who were asked if we would like to become choral conductors. So before going to England, I had already had some connection with choral music. Right. And while I was in Bristol, I sang in all the choirs because I loved singing in choirs, and I studied singing as well, although they did not have a degree on conducting, not even conducting orchestral conducting.
Right,
they have choral conducting as a subject, as a part of the studies. So my majors were in composition, musicology, and music education.
One of the things that is most remarkable about Venezuela is the tremendous musical educational opportunities. For example, El Sistema, which is known worldwide, and you played a part in developing El Sistema, didn't you?
Yes, I had. I worked for El Sistema for 35 years.
Yeah.
So that was when I came to Venezuela in 1976 from my degrees in England. El Sistema was 1 year old. Mm-hmm. And Abreu was a very enthusiastic and visionary man, and he was a very good friend of Alberto Grau, who had been my teacher, and he was not my husband at the time. We didn't marry until the 80s. Mm-hmm. And he invited me, he asked me if I could help him with the academic programs, since I was coming from university, in the Music Conservatory of El Sistema. And then I was part also of all the teams that created all the academic grounds in Venezuela to create a music university and to create postgrad in music in other universities. So I was doing the curriculum, the syllabuses, and all of that. But at the same time, Alberto Grau and myself, together with the Schola Cantorum and the choral movement that we were fostering in Venezuela, we were the choral brand, the choral arm of El Sistema for 35 years. And that was a great experience, crazy work. That I cannot say how many hours. If the day had more than 24 hours, we will be working more than 24 hours. And we did that, we created so many spaces. Abreu was a driving force that never stopped. He would call you at 10 o'clock in the evening, 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and we have to do this and we have to do that. There were no Saturdays, Sundays, there were no holidays. I had 2 children. Sometimes I had to say, "Oh, Antonio, I need to feed my children. Wait." So I will go to the rehearsal sometimes with my 2 babies, feeding them and carrying them around and all that. Those were very intense years, but when I look back, I can say how fortunate I have been to be in the right place at the right moment to do that.
When you were developing these curricula for the different educational institutions and El Sistema, etc., how did you approach putting the musical choices together, shall we say? Because on the one hand, your academic background in Britain presumably had an emphasis on choral works by English composers. But then when you go back to Venezuela, was there at that point a choral composing tradition that you could draw from?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In Venezuela, El Sistema is not the beginning of our music history.
Right.
I can say that we had not a large but a substantial school of composers during the colonial times in the 18th century. And that tradition during the 19th century slowed down because of the civil wars. And that tradition was restarted at the beginning of the 20th century by Vicente Emilio Sojo. Sojo was a self-taught man, composer, very bright mind, very interesting person. And he created a school of composition. And many musicians came from around the country to study with this maestro. And he founded in 1929 the first mixed choir in Caracas called Orfeón Lamas. And this school of composers were working mainly on choral works for this choir. I mean, it was not a school of composers who were working for the future. No, they were setting poems, Hispano-American poetry. Soho was really a great instructor in how to set text to music. And all this music, all these choral songs and madrigals are beautifully worked in the sense that the poem flows in a natural way within the music. Composers were driving ideas from different sources, from Renaissance style, from more romantic style, from more impressionistic style. And he was a very open-minded man. So when I was here, there was already a wealth of repertoire that I knew and that I could draw from. And also in Venezuela, the tradition of not separating academic music from popular music is very important. So choirs love to sing popular music. And I studied choral conducting in Caracas when I came back with Alberto Grau. And part of our work while we studied was to create choral arrangements of popular music and create our own compositions. So I could combine repertoire. So I could give my choirs something that was familiar to them, and I can bring also with me music that I had learned in my studies in England. So that was very enriching, and it's the way it is today. You know, I would say that we sing from the world a lot of repertoire here.
Right.
And when I go out with my choirs, I bring out the repertoire that we own.
I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of the music that developed in Venezuela and South America in general was, I don't want to say inspired, but it was driven by the church. It was sacred music. But then there would also be an indigenous musical tradition as well. When did those things come together? When did they blend?
Well, let's see it in a different way.
Okay.
The composers from the colonial times were writing mainly for the church. You know, I am not going to tell you the story of the music from the colonial Latin America, because we know that there were different levels of colonies. You know, in the viceroyalties, you had the music of the cathedrals. That was high music that was written in Latin, using the styles of the Renaissance, Baroque, etc., or in vernacular languages like Nahuatl or other languages of the natives. Also, we have negrillas that were written in the sort of Spanish slangs that the Africans had learned and spoke. Then we have the music of the missions that is not the music from the cathedrals. And this music is compositions like Cipoli that is simpler, let's say, in contrapuntal textures, because they had to be sung by the younger Indians, natives, and that was music to teach music.
Right.
And then comes the music that was written in Venezuela and Brazil, that was the music of the cofrades. It's not neither cathedrals nor missions. The cofrades were religious societies by the church that were writing music for the church, but many of the composers did not belong to the social, let's say, elite of the time, and could not be contracted by the church. So there were these communications. That music was written for the church in Latin and Spanish. There's a lot of music written in Spanish, in the style of the sacred music. When Soho restarts already in the 20th century, of course, the whole 19th century had gone by, and in Venezuela, let's say, the tradition of composing valses and pasodobles and popular instrumental music was very alive, because it was the trend of the time. Nationalism was everywhere.
Right.
So the composers who were writing in Soho's group, they were writing in Spanish choral songs, not sacred, totally profane, poem.
Right.
And some of them were already incorporating elements of the vernacular, rhythms, formulas, way of singing. For instance, Antonio Esteves, he was incorporating music from the llanos, from the plains, the way of singing of the tenors, rhythmic complexities. And another composer called Angel Sauce, he started, and even Soho, they started collecting popular songs and arranging them for the choirs. So they felt they were doing what Villalobos was doing in Brazil at the same time. I mean, Villalobos was doing that in the 1920s. Kodaly and Bartok were known here too. They knew that they were doing that also in their countries. And they were using these melodies to teach in the schools. So there were other composers like Sergio Moreira who taught in the schools with popular songs from Venezuela, but beautifully arranged for one voice or two voices and piano. So they were already incorporating, because as I tell you, there was never a separation. I think this music were there from the very beginning.
So talk about the ensembles that you are involved with in Venezuela today. Which ensembles are they, and what is it that you are preparing them to sing, to perform?
Yeah. Well, I am the artistic director of the Fundación Schola Cantorum. The Fundación Schola Cantorum is an organization, non-government organization, that this year is celebrating 55 years of work. And this is an organization where we have a program for children in the favelas, a social program called Construir Cantando. We have a youth program, and we have the Schola Cantorum, which is our mixed choir. The Schola Cantorum, the mixed choir, it's a non-professional choir, but we audition. It's a choir where we train mainly the leaders and the singers to teach other generations. So we've been doing that for 55 years. So I am involved as an artistic director of the whole program and almost general manager. I do everything with a very good team of people around me. And I conduct the Schola Cantorum. I create the programs, but I'm not conducting all the programs. Now I have other young conductors who are conducting too. And I am involved also with a choir in a private enterprise, which is a beer company called Polar, that is a very old company in the country. And I believe that choral music brings life together in workers and managers, workers. And I've been involved with them for 30 years. It has been an example of what we've achieved with these choirs and this company. And I am still involved with them. And I am very happy with what we have achieved. And this is what I do in Venezuela. I am not all the year here. I give them, part of my time, because I am also guest conducting, teaching, and also visiting my grandchildren.
You have grandchildren in Miami, is that true?
I have 2 grandchildren in Bogota, 3 grandchildren in Miami, and 1 in Caracas.
So you have to do the tour.
Yes.
One of the things that you are known for is your close association with Osvaldo Golijov.
Yes.
The Argentinian composer. How did you come to start working with Golijov?
Well, it happened through the Oregon Bach Festival. I was part of the Oregon Bach Festival since the early 90s, because Roy Salzman, whom I knew through the International Federation for Choral Music, invited me to be part of Helmut Rilling's class in the early 90s. And I was part of that class, and I went to Germany, and we founded a Bach Academy in Venezuela and all that. So in 1996, Helmut Rilling decided to commission in the Oregon Bach Festival 4 composers from the Americas, 4 cantatas, and the program was called Bach and the Americas. And Osvaldo Golijov was one of them. And the cantata he was commissioned is Oceania. And then Roy Salzman and Helmut Rilling, who knew me well, asked me if the Schola Cantorum would be willing to premiere that piece. So we said yes, and that our collaboration started there. The beginning was not very happy. It was a very difficult time. And we always laugh with Osvaldo when we meet, because it was a time where composers were writing in paper by hand, not yet all this finale and all that. Of course, no internet connection, no Zoom, no cell phones, fax. It was a little better than before, no stamps, fax. And Osvaldo is a composer of action. Perhaps he doesn't write on the paper everything he thinks. Mm-hmm. And he prefers to be there to give you a sketch. Then you try the sketch, and then we create together. But, he was in Boston, I was in Caracas, and he sent me all these faxes, and I just look at this and say, okay, what shall I do? So I started rehearsing the best I could, and I said, okay, I didn't know him. I will send you a recording in a cassette, and go to the mail.
The good old days.
Yeah. And then Osvaldo listens to my first attempts to sing parts of his Oceania. And of course, we were singing the right notes and the right rhythms, but we were not singing and the right words. But the style was totally my style, because I didn't know what he wanted. I mean, I could not understand really. And he was angry with me. He said, I didn't understand anything of the things he wanted. And I said, well, I am not a witch. I mean, I cannot wish. I cannot imagine what you want. If you don't write it, or you don't send me a letter or whatever, or you don't call me, and then I got angrier with him. So we were quarreling over the phone. And of course, he gave me more and more ideas and feedback. And I was really, let's say, challenged by this. And I really wanted to do it very well. So when we went to Oregon for this festival, my choir was very well prepared. And I was extremely flexible. And I told my choir, be ready to change anything at any time. We are flexible, we know how to improvise, we can do things. So, and when we auditioned for Osvaldo, his piece, before going with the orchestra and all that, and he asked for changes and all that, he was so happy and so touched by our work that we became very good friends then. That was a success in Oregon in 1996. And at that time, Helmut Rilling was thinking of the celebration of Bach's 250th anniversary in year 2000 in Stuttgart. And he had the idea of commissioning the 4 Passions, the Passion Project, to 4 composers from different cultural backgrounds. So he commissioned Wolfgang Grimm, Sofia Gubaidulina from Russia, and Tan Dun from China, USA. Mm-hmm. And he chose Osvaldo Golijov to do the, let's say, Latin American Passion. Osvaldo is Jewish. He didn't even know the gospel. So that was even more complicated. And Helmut, we met with Helmut, and he said to Osvaldo, but you have to do this together with the Schola Cantorum and with Maria, because I know you are good friends. And Osvaldo met with me and said, Maria, shall we accept this? And I say, okay, you are the composer, I help you, but let's work better this time. And well, I remember he started by asking me what was my experience of living the Holy Week and these celebrations in Venezuela. So I told him the stories of my childhood when we will go to a place near the beach, and here there are many processions, like in Spain, open processions of the saints. But instead of having a band and making it so formal, here is very popular, very rhythmic, with drumming, people even drinking rum, and and people singing happily or singing painfully, very dramatic. And I say, because it's a syncretism between the Catholicism, Christianism, and all the African traditions. So they, everything comes to one whole. And I think that gave Osvaldo a hint of what he wanted to do. And he did not create a Latin American passion. He created more Afro-Caribbean passion. And he surrounded himself by wonderful musicians, people he knew in Boston, in the Berklee School of Music, Luciana Souza, Brazilian singer. So we were a team of, I call them my circus, because it was a circus of wonderful people. Everybody had ideas, and well, it was, to tell you the details, how did we get to the premiere of the Golijov Passion in Stuttgart? It's a long story, but it was.
But you got there.
Beautiful, beautiful road.
You've also worked with John Adams.
Yes.
And Peter Sellers on their world premiere, A Flowering Tree.
Yes.
It was an opera that debuted in 2006. What was that experience like?
Oh, that was also a very beautiful experience, but totally, totally different. I had known Peter Sellers before through Osvaldo Golijov. I think he had come to some of our concerts of the Bach, of the Golijov Passion. And I had seen some of his mise en scène of the Bach cantatas, especially. I loved what he was doing. Sometimes I thought he was extreme, but we live in the 21st century, so we need to find new ways of making people understand all these texts. And John Adams, I admire very much as an opera composer.
Yeah.
And I like very much some of his productions. So when we were asked if they could come to Venezuela to listen to the Schola Cantorum and to see us, I said, of course, and come. And they came and we sang for them. John was asking me to sing for him all kinds of textures, very rhythmically, complex, polyrhythmic, Gregorian chant, that. And Peter wanted us to see how did we move and do that. So John is a totally different composer from Golijov. He's a very disciplined composer, and he will send you exactly what he wants, precisely what he wants. And his music is hard to learn. It's hard to rehearse and to learn by heart. And my choir is not an opera choir. So we had to work hours to learn well John's music in the style he wanted. And also he stretched us, vocally speaking, to sing in different ways, like Osvaldo. So I always had to have care with my singers and explain and find with colleagues, singers, how to do this and that, so that we will not hurt the voices and all that. And then when it came to the premiere, we went to Vienna. It was a time to work with Peter there. And I am a person who thinks the body is very important for conductors.
Mm.
I exercise, I do yoga, I do Tai Chi, I like gymnastics and all that. And I told my choir, we need to be in shape physically. So we were in Caracas getting into shape, because I said, Peter will not make any compromise to ask you to be on stage in, for 3 hours like this or like this or so nobody can say, oh, my back is hurting. No way.
No.
So when we went to Vienna, it was also Mozart's year. It was the New Crown Hope Festival, beautiful, for celebrate that Mozart's anniversary. We worked 3 weeks every day with both of them.
It's intense.
And very intense. The choir will start at 8:30 in the morning, exercising on stage with me, stretching, exercising, doing movement, warming up. And then 9:30, we will work with Peter on stage for 2 hours. And then will come John, and then in the afternoon, and then in the evening. And I think we managed also to do a very beautiful premiere of A Flowering Tree, and later on recording. So I feel extremely privileged of these 2 projects that for a Latin American choir were huge challenges, responsibilities. I mean, some people ask me, did you ever think that you could fail? And then I said, yes, many times, but I didn't want to fail. So I told my singers, okay, shall we do this? If you tell me yes, it's like if we go to a battle, you have to follow. You cannot say in the middle of the road, oh, I cannot comply with so many. This is absolutely dedication. So, of course, there were people who could not do it. So I said, okay, goodbye. But then I had a number of people, and I auditioned and re-auditioned and this and this and this and this, and people followed until the end, and that was beautiful.
What do you feel when you're on the podium in front of a choir to conduct them? How does that make you feel? What is it that you enjoy about it? What is it that you get out of that experience?
I love the human communication through gesture and music. It's a feeling of energy, of life together through beauty. Perhaps I cannot explain it with words, but when I start rehearsing a choir and we start singing together, I see that sometimes my soul gets transformed. I am really in another sphere of life. And it's like a religious experience.
There's a very strong spiritual dimension.
It's a very strong spiritual dimension. And as the music, as the work is cooking and becomes more and more fluid, and music is going better, and we are communicating better in a way that you don't have to say too many words, then the experience is more brilliant. It's the light becomes even more intense. It's so beautiful. And if we can communicate that to the audience, that's the final goal.
Yes. Because ultimately, as you said, it's all about communication, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all about communication.
Well, look, Maria, I hope that we will get to see you back in Houston with the Houston Chamber Choir at some stage in the not too distant future. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. María Guinand, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and John. I enjoy very much this conversation, and I look forward to work with the Houston Chamber Choir and to see all my dear, dear friends in Houston very soon.
Come back soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all who support the Houston Chamber Choir, our season underwriter, Silvercrest Asset Management Group, our patrons, donors, and subscribers. We appreciate all you do to help keep the work of the Houston Chamber Choir possible. I'm St. John Flynn, and this is Behind the Music. Join us again next time.
The Houston Chamber Choirs with One Accord is your one-stop shop for choral joy. If you enjoyed this podcast, help us to continue our mission to grow the esteem and appreciation of choral music by sharing, reviewing, and subscribing to our content. As a 501c3 nonprofit, support from listeners like you allows us to continue to create new and exciting programming. For more information about us and how you can support our work, please visit houstonchamberchoir.org/give.